Welcome, dear citizens. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for being part of us. This is the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Demiano Masesa. And again, we have this episode that is going to be exciting, and I have an interesting set of panelists that you would want to be engaged with. Today, and in this way, we are going to discuss taking stock of all internal rebel movements and militias and the cults, how Ugandans have lost their lives over time, and who should protect citizens from such schemes. I would want us to go into a brief introduction of what I'm talking about. Then from there, I will introduce my panel. Uganda is marred not one, but many conflicts. Conflicts are various, at various levels, and are composed of interlocking struggles. These conflicts are linked to challenges of state and nation building, accumulating, centralizing, and centralization of power resources necessary for effective territorial domination, and of course, one would say get-rich-quick schemes. Uganda has had a series of rebel movements during post-independence era. With the change of governments, a number of rebel activities, militias, cults, have equally taken center stage. Some of those known to date are the Lord Resistance Army, at least we all know that, the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, the National Rescue Front 2, the West Nile Bank Front, made up of predominantly, of course, Idi Amin era soldiers, the Uganda People's Army, UPA, headed by Peter Tai, Minister of Defense in Obote's second government in the late 1998, a new rebel group calling itself Uganda Salvation Army, USA, made an appearance in eastern Uganda, attacking Tooro prison and abducting a number of inmates. They later called themselves the Citizens Army for Multi-Party Politics in Lira, headed by the former Chief of Staff of the Obote 2 UNLA Army Brigade, Smith Opona Chak. But later, of course, he was killed. Of course, we had allegations of Dr. Chiinji. Then later we had Herbert Itongwa and the National Democratic Army. So in here, of course, these have repeated reports of collaboration and coordination between themselves. It's a discussion we want to have ourselves on and see where the citizens in this all this mix. Joined on the panel from my far right, as usual, is Edgar Tabaro. Edgar Tabaro is, of course, the renowned and one of the senior lawyers in town. Edgar, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know whether we still have links with Bujumbura, and you still...
We're in the East African community.
Thank you.
I interact with all East Africans.
An associate of CCG. Thank you, Edgar, for honoring our invitation. Yes. Next to Edgar is Professor Ndebesa Mwambutsya, the senior East African, but also is from the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Makerere.
Senior East African, we are all East African.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes. Then, of course, our regular panelist, Sarah Bireete, the Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance, and a lawyer. Sarah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, except I need the viewers to note that you are continuously marginalizing women on this place.
We shall have to my producers will have to work something out. Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, for being with us. And finally, is a senior citizen and a very common face in our political circles, Honorable Professor Latigo Ogenga. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Damien, and thank you, my colleagues. This is my first time. I remember some time ago you asked me if I could participate, and I had commitments, but I'm glad to be on this panel today.
Thank you very much
thank you.
For honoring the invitation. Of course, this is your maiden appearance. I think, Edgar, this is your maiden here, but of course, in the wider CCG space, of course, you're always with us.
I always interact with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'll need to start with Professor. You need to give us, put us into context by giving us a brief introduction towards the conceptualization and understanding of the threats of armed non-state groups to human security and the state of Uganda.
When you say professor, we are two here.
Professor Latigo.
The functional professor is the other one, and I would have loved for him, yes, for him to start it. I'm an insect scientist.
That's the risk of him hijacking. I think I should
Interesting. At least we, Professor of history. And now that we have the historian in the house, yeah, I think Professor Ndebesa, you can take us on.
Thank you. Well, I could make some comments and submissions about this phenomenon of armed conflicts, rebels, militia, and all those. To me, that is a manifestation of poor governance and management of diversity in the region and in the country. And those militia or rebel groups are not only here. By the way, you didn't mention NRA. I don't know whether you feared to mention NRA. NRA was also a rebel group. So why rebel? Why all these things? I think among other factors, there are of course structural factors that are responsible for those things, because we are basically a peasant society, and a peasant society is prone to having, in case there is no good governance, you are likely to have those insurgents. I think urbanized people have insurrections, but communities like ours have insurgents. But the militia you are talking about, you seem to be implying that the militia is always non-state. There is state militia and non-state militia. So we have to know from the beginning.
I warned you.
That we have to look at the state militia as well. And we have had state militia, even if we can widen it in the region. We have Munguki in Kenya, which is the same state. There is Imbonerakure in Burundi. He's a Burundian expert. There was Interahamwe, but I'm told there is another group also which is related to the state in Rwanda. The Sudan, South Sudan and North Sudan, there are basket cases. So here we have had rebels, both state and non-state. I mean militia, then we have got rebels. And as I told you earlier on, there are challenges of management of the state. There are challenges that include inequality, both in economic terms and political terms. There is no equal access to power, no equal access to resources, and these ones combine to create such a situation. But even if we go to the emotional aspects of life, sometimes we don't respect each other, and some people call others animals, others are called primitive, others are called pigs, others are called animal, all sorts of names, and people sometimes want their dignity. So also not respecting people's dignity can cause such challenges. So Uganda, we are a plural society, but we don't have pluralism. To have pluralism is that we should accept each other and tolerate each other and accept to listen to each other. Now, as long as the government, for example, or the government does not pay attention to the concerns of the people and just dismisses them and says we know it all, as long as the government is also not formal, we have got a lot of informality of government since independence. There is a formal government and the informal government. And you cannot hold informal government accountable. You cannot hold somebody who is occupying a very, very, very big influential position in a government, but is not known, is not formal, is not regularized. That one you can't make him or her accountable. Now, such a challenges of good governance, as well as democracy, in a situation where the society is plural, we are a plural society, you are likely to have people contest each other, and if there are no means and institutions to manage that contestation, then they end up into violence. And then the state also responds violently to the extent that they also create militia. If you talk about militia, I think if I can go in even in the recent past, recent as since independence, I think Kabaka had a militia somehow. Obote, UPC had a militia. There was a militia, especially in the 1980s.
With the Kabaka, remember
What was
in
the
Daiga,
Kabaka's
at Indaiga.
At Ndaiga,
Yeah, in Daiga, they in
people were
Daiga
killed,
killed.
So
Yeah.
we have
64.
64, 65. So these scenarios are not new. And I mean, the government or soldiers were almost all militia. But when you come to the most recent, I mean, if you talk about this Kayura group was what? What was the crime preventers? That was a militia. But then technically speaking, even the LDUs are a militia. The Arrow Boys or whatever, those are militia. And those militia are actually informal. So once we have an informal state, an informal government, then we shall have informal armed groups. That is the challenge which needs to be addressed. But as for now, I think I can let others also make comments.
No, let me go now to Edgar. Edgar, what really motivates some of these groups to really come?
You know, I don't know how to situate this, and I don't know whether our concentration should be on post-independence or what we call the modern state, the foundation of the modern state of Uganda, that was proclaimed, depending on how you look at it, he'll throw some more light, whether it's in 1892 with the arrival of Captain Lugard and declaring Uganda a British protectorate, or 1901 when the Order in Council was passed declaring Uganda a protectorate for
1894.
1894. That was Captain Lugard. And remember, he also had the militia, and inherited some of the militia that had been used in the 1988 to 1892 social religious wars in Buganda. You remember there were the Arabs, the Muslims, then there were the Wafalansa and Wangereza, which translated into the Protestants and the Catholics.
If you can allow me just to give you some a little bit of back history
Yes,
for
please.
that.
I'm much obliged.
Yeah, the Uganda Army, first of all, the Uganda Army, which was King's African Rifles,
Yes.
the core of it was formed by a militia.
The militia, yes.
These were the Nubians.
I was coming to that. You just took
But
it
those
out of
came
mouth.
before.
No, but I'm
religious
I'm
wars.
situating the problem,
Okay.
as it were. Because if we rush into these others, then we'll fail to capture where we made some commissions and omissions, and therefore translating into what we have today. And indeed, is mentioned. I don't know. I don't know the sensitivities of this show. I did want to mention communities, but I hope in our thesis, as we are talking really freely here, and if I'm mentioning communities, it's not that I harbor any ill will towards communities. We're situating a problem that we need to tackle. If you look at most of the independence, pre-independence conflicts in Uganda, they had a Nubian element, and some of the earliest conflicts in the early independent state of Uganda had a Nubian element. You remember the mutiny in 1964? The mutiny? You remember the mutiny in 1964? Yeah. The same happened in Tanzania. It happened in Kenya. And by the way, for Kenya and Uganda, it had also a Nubian element. And how did the state react? You know what Makerere did? Brother Nyerere is said to be a saint and what have you, but he was very ruthless when it came to management of affairs of the state. When it came to the state, he asserted his authority like any other, like military leaders that we have all over Africa. He was very uncompromising, and we know what followed. So in Uganda, the conflicts, you know, if you can look at the classifications, the academic classifications of conflicts, there's low intensity, high intensity, and there are all those full-blown conflicts. Then you emphasized non-state actors, and the professor brought in another aspect of state actors and talked about state militia. So the question is, what has given, what is the fertile ground that has given given the impetus for proliferation of these militia forces? What is that? I mean, before we go to tackling all those issues, what is it that has led to proliferation of this whatever? What conflict is it? Is it that the state and we the citizenry have failed to rein in or hold whoever is entrusted with security or what would call what would we call it, national security? We failed to hold them accountable, that we have proliferation of these whatever. Then you talked about NRA. NRA and its successor, the UPDF, is actually an amalgamation of many of these forces that you talked about. It has the UPA, it has the UPDA, the one of late Otem Almadi and who was Kanohu, Angelo Okello. We have some LRA, by the way. Where is Banya, Brigadier Banya?
It's in the north.
He's in the north. Deployed in OWC or?
No, he's. I think he's just settled into private life.
West Nile Bank Front. You talked about West Nile Bank Front. Major General Bamuze was in West Nile Bank Front. All the UPDF is an amalgamation of all these
Former rebels. Including NRA.
Even UNLF and dictatorship and many others. Nalu of Amon Wazira, the one of Hitler Rego and Musa Chweru, by the way, was in UPDA. And many other whatevers. So UPDF is an amalgamation of all these units. Now the question is, has the culture of all these units been transformed, or we've remained the same? And maybe what we are seeing, what the contemporary security issues are informed by what historically happened. I don't know. I've been thinking loud, and I wish to throw it to maybe Sarah to educate us further. She seems to have interacted with militia forces.
Edgar thrown it to you. Right there. Right there. Yes. You pick on the button.
That you could have been quietly a member of those militia forces.
Well, she has been involved in conflict in the region, in the Great Lakes region.
Because we're understanding what motivates this group.
What defines a stable national security system? First of all, you need a stable population. What defines stability of a population? Do we have progress in this country? Do we have equitable access to national resources? Do we have equitable regional development in this country? Do we have equal opportunities when it comes to access of national jobs? These are part of the national objectives and directives of state policy in our constitution. But are they fulfilled? Beyond the social fabric of the population, you look at the neighborhood. Do we have a stable neighborhood? We have South Sudan. We are all surrounded by porous borders, but we have unstable nations. We have South Sudan, we have DRC, we have the small arms corridor, the cattle rustling corridor, Karamoja going through Ethiopia. We have now raging conflict.
Somalia.
Yes, we have a big conflict in Ethiopia. There are nomads in Ethiopia. So we have Ethiopia, we have Somalia, we have South Sudan. That is a free...
Central African Republic
yes,
too.
That is a free zone for proliferation of small arms and light weapons. So when you come down south, we have Rwanda. Borders have been closed now for 3 years.
I've not followed carefully.
Yeah, but it's a long time because it was 1 year before COVID. It is a long time and we are not realizing. So in East African community, we have 3 countries whose borders are closed. Uganda, Rwanda, Uganda, DRC, Rwanda, DRC, Rwanda, Burundi. Closed, permanent closure of borders, which is contrary to all protocols and principles of East African integration. So that is the regional architecture of our country. So can you claim to be stable? A stable eye amidst a foreign face? That my eyesight is proper, and that is what we are surrounded with as a country. So when you come to Uganda, and I'm not saying, if you look at the trend of armed rebellion, most of them is a contestation or a continuing disagreement of the political fabric. You look at the latest ones, including Herbert Itonga, who was part of NRA in Ruwero, and it's described as a fierce fighter. Why did he take up arms? You look at, for example, the immediate, I think the first disagreement within NRA, I'm trying to come first because the historic has been explained. What happened to Kaira? When you talk to most Uganda, they thought the person who was fighting to liberate them was Kaira. But in the last 2 weeks of the fall of Kampala, the face of the revolution changed, according to them. So did that create conflict? And how do we resolve these issues as a nation? I am not saying this is the cause of conflict. But what we have failed as a country with independence and the 6 decades of independence, we have failed to build the political consensus continuously. The first elections in this country, 1961, for the independence elections, DP, led by Benjamin Kawan, did they take power? By then, the people who thought had power did not want a Catholic president. Have we ever overcome that, what that could have caused to this nation? That could have been a cause of what we are still going through as a nation. Because people describe that as the only free and fair election that this
61?
country has ever had. What was the year? Benjamin
61? It was not free
It
and
was
fair.
not fair and fair,
Okay.
especially in Uganda.
It was actually
Far from it.
It was actually rigged.
Rigged election. So we
Rigged.
have never had
There was
a free and
violence.
fair-
There was violence.
There was
in
violence.
But
61.
did the DP win?
It won controversial.
Controversially.
Okay. Yeah, we-
All non-Ichwanuka
that
sponsored
could have-
candidates had difficulty in Uganda.
So that
They
could
raised
have
their
marked-
houses and banana plantations and coffee plants.
So that could have marked. That could have been a birth of violence.
Now you understand why our politics is the electoral violence we have in Uganda. It has that's the that's the
Yes.
background to it.
So if we we are incapable as a country of holding a free and fair election up to today.
Even under fundamental change.
No, but what free and fair? At least the 3 times elections have been tested under the 1995 Constitution. The Supreme Court has found glaring gaps. I am not a member of that bench. All the court decisions are clear that there are gaps in our elections. Although they fall short of cancelling them using the substantiality clause, but they clearly mark the gaps. I see the way my brother is eyeing me.
No, I'm not
But-
saying you. I've given you the background that maybe maybe free and fair should be looked at in context, in the context of Uganda, because I mean,
from our own.
because no, honestly,
That we have failed. We should lower the
just a quick
standards.
one, just a quick one, just a quick one. You remember in 2001, in the aftermath of the 2001 electoral violence, we had an inquiry by Parliament. I think that's when you joined. You were in Parliament then. We had an inquiry, but unfortunately, when the report of that inquiry came to the floor of Parliament,
It was never discussed.
it was. You remember?
On the floor.
Yes. You remember Sedo. I remember very well Wanjusi Wasieva.
The
The-
electoral violence.
yes.
Kakoza Mutare and the rest.
Yes, actually the whole
What is the
thing.
name of that report?
Professor
Because
Ogenga, you were there. You remember on the floor of Parliament, it was vulgarized. I remember when Wanjusi Wasieva was defending SEDO and saying that it was an NGO, a civil society organization. Remember the late Honorable Agura
Even Kaku had
standing
got
up
the
to
committee
mock
of
Wanjusi
Parliament
Wasieva
plan.
over his
Another
academic
militia.
papers.
It was
Another
a state
militia
militia.
was-
Professor Ogenga, you remember when Agura said, you obviously know the issues of Wanjusi Wasieva to do with the papers. So even papers of an NGO he can't comprehend. No, a serious debate was vulgarized and we've never discussed it further. We buried and the culture of violence continued.
Yes, but if I may conclude so that Professor Latigo
What they
gives
discussed
us
in Parliament.
that dynamic. If you look at the use of state machinery, you know the state controls the tools of violence. And normally it has monopoly over violence. No. It is supposed to. But if you look at abuse of office in our security agencies, really it is glaring, it is beyond abnormal. I don't know what name to call it. So the culture we've had of leaders is to say, I was just seeing yesterday President Museveni's statement on the coup in Guinea, saying nobody should come to power through a coup. But how did he come? How did he come? And why did he do that?
It was a protected war.
No, no, no.
It was a protected war by the people, not a few elite army officers.
Why did he come the way he did, and why is he changing the constitution to keep himself in power? So these are the things that really we have all signs of a failed state in terms of our governance. These are the signs. I think Ugandans are too peaceful people. Because if you look at the nature of our elections, the nature of our governance, the nature of separation of civil and political rights, if Ugandans were violent, this country would be ripe for.
Interesting.
For what? Repeat that.
If Ugandans were violent by nature, this country would be
And
violent.
you honestly think we are not violent?
No, they are pushed to the beyond the wall.
Really?
Yes.
We are not
Because
violent?
the way the state,
Actually, we need to.
the way
Ugandans
the
are very
state
peaceful.
treats the people here, Ugandans are very peaceful.
There is no
Professor,
community
I'm
which is peaceful by nature. It is socially constructed.
Professor, you've been quiet and listened so much. I want to invite you in to have your thoughts.
Thank you. You know, the problem of violence in the management of states in Africa is like that analogy of people being asked to describe the elephant, and somebody touching the ear will tell you it looks like it is flattish. Another one. That is the challenge. But for us, Uganda, there are two very important points that we could put together and say, what are the elements that we can compare between these two? And since this came after the other one, what are the changes that have occurred? The UPC era and the start of elective democracy in Uganda. My late father-in-law, Gino Bonyo, was a DP. He was the first member of parliament in our place. But we were kids, small kids, but we could remember. For example, on the day they were collecting ballot boxes, everything had to be done to follow that colonial officer to make sure he didn't stop on the way and change the ballots. And
That's 1961.
1962.
62.
Yes, and that remains in our minds. And then when UPC came to power, instead of serving the country,
Which UPC, 1 or 2?
one, when it first came to power, instead of serving the country as a national entity, it became a very possessive entity, that it would recognize UPCs, it would reward UPCs, and because the two key parties in Uganda were founded really on the basis of religion and Kabaka Yaka on tribe, all these elements became embedded in the factors that drove our political processes in our country. And so it wasn't very surprising that when Amin took over, the killings were really ethnic initially, and then later securing power instead of utilizing power for the benefit of everybody. But the Amin era is something we don't compare. I want to compare that UPC time with the coming into power of the national resistance movement, because they fought UPC and made complaints about UPC that they were going to address. But when they came to power, did they address those weaknesses of UPC that made UPC an organization that they could rally people to aid and fight? No, they didn't. You know, when they were marching into town, the things that happened. But that one is an emotive moment. But since then, Have things changed? Have elections been free and fair? Have the institutions of the state worked for everybody equitably? So that you know, human beings depend on hope. If you don't see hope,
You become hopeless.
oh yeah, then everything changes, and that is the challenge. This last election, you know, although I was a participant, I spent a lot of time in Kampala, and I was watching what was, and I just felt sorry for our country.
Because of what you saw in Kampala.
No, watching the campaign and watching what was happening nationally.
Because there was widespread violence in Acholi as well. Actually, it's just that it didn't capture your attention, but there was.
No, I'm talking about the national, because the objective seems to be letting people make choices that were free, that everybody would embrace, and the amount of hatred you could see. Now, how can you get rid of violence when in the process of either holding on to power or seeking power, you apply hatred? It's not sustainable.
Hatred from which come?
And it's
From,
no
or was it
longer
across
a
the
do
board?
or die, it's a do and die.
Because Latigo must be seen as a bad person, even when he's legitimately contesting an election so that he can provide leadership to the country. Because you are in opposition or you are in NAP or whatever, you are just a wrong person.
But, you know, Professor, when you straight it like that, we lose sight of even intra-party election violence. Yeah.
That one, you know, the intra-party thing is merely is
No,
merely
it's not cosmetic, it's real.
no, it's merely when you reduce it to a small body of people. You could as well reduce that to.
Professor,
Yes.
there is a trend. Even the intra-party violence is a result of unequal treatment. Those within the party itself, you find one candidate is unequally treated compared to the other one. They don't say, you are all candidates of our party, go and play your politics the way. No, you find one is accompanied by soldiers, the other one has no soldiers. One is given a lot of money by the state or by the party, the other one is
By the
not
state or by actors in the state?
or by actors in the state, whatever the case may be, but we have bastardized our politics by using money. So I was just saying that even within the party, you find unequal treatment by the leadership. Even within the opposition parties, you find the executive of the party treating others as not their own, and that causes conflicts.
That one is actually, those are basically symptoms of the bigger problem that I'm talking about. Because, you know, let us relate our situation to what is happening in the US now. The Trump supporters, what do you call it, the QAnon group, and the level of it amounts, because the only thing that drives people without thought is emotive responses. And
Maybe, Professor, I need to ask, what's possibly for also the viewers to know, what would be the difference between terrorism, armed rebellion, and possibly usual criminality?
The only difference would be the justification. Otherwise, all of them is violence. Resolving an issue through violence out of the state institutions. Because otherwise you could say, we are a country. If there's a problem, why don't we sit down and talk about it? If that avenue is blocked, then the only way to resolve it is to seek things outside the state. And you end up, amongst those things outside the state is the right to use violent means to express your, to seek your interest, defend it, and pursue it. But really, basically, for me, the biggest challenge I see is that for Uganda, nearly every group that have come to power, once they are in power, instead of thinking that being in power is an obligation towards the country and everybody, it becomes a right that must not be challenged and that must not be contested for. And in the end, the only way that Latigo will say, I will also enjoy power, is to wrestle power from those who are power, and also maybe do the same thing. And then the cycle will continue.
And then you find the citizens are the ones suffering, because when these people are attacking, the rebels are attacking.
And then at our level, we are saying actually that when you talk to somebody about an issue and he's not straight, they say he's talking with the grass in the mouth.
Grass.
Yes. He's chewing grass and trying to talk so the words can't be audible. So all of us, and including me, for Uganda, we all speak with the grass in our mouth. Let us spit off the grass and then let the words we want to say come out clearly. And we deal with what you want.
Edgar, I just want to bring in some aspect that I just popped up when you talked about the use of armed force, possibly force, to get what you want. But then there was the issue of the amnesty. And I would want to know how far has Amnesty gone into trying to shield or ensure that some of these conflicts don't really come up, especially for the rebels.
You know, Professor, I'll come to that. Professor talked about the grass and their knowledge amongst the Acholi people. Amongst the Acholi people, they have a fable of Obibi. Obibi as an ogre. That it's so fabled that it's taught in their language as part of their vernacular to children who are attempting to learn.
What does it mean?
Obibi, it's an ogre that big creature.
We will start shaving the hair from here, but by the time you reach here, this other one has already grown.
Violence has become like that fable of Obibi amongst the actual people. I think we have an Obibi here.
We have a new term on the
we have an Obibi. And for us to properly understand what Obibi is, these aspects that they brought up are very important for us to consider. And the fact that they're talking of we have failed to form a national consensus. A debate I've had with Professor Ndebesa before, that in absence of a national consensus, there's not much we are going to achieve as a country. There were two commissions of inquiry, Wild and Master Committee reports, that informed our processes to achieve independence. The discussions at what was it? Manchester? What was it? Lancaster discussion. And we don't have to do too much. We just have to go back to some of those things, contextualize them, and debate them, and implement the letter and spirit. They are still very relevant. Yes, are still issues. Yes, still. Yeah? I'll give you the example of. I'll give you the example of the Rwenzoris. The issues in the Rwenzoris, in the Rwenzori region, where I come from, where I'm domiciled. I'm from Fort Portal, and the issues in the Rwenzori region. There was a commission of inquiry, chaired by Sembeguya, member of parliament. I think he was a member of parliament from East Uganda, what is now, I think, Sembabule. Gasasira. Gasasira, Frank Gasasira, who later became PS for local government. He was, I think, assistant DC for Toro in charge of Busongora. He was the technical officer attached to that committee. And, you know, when you look at the conflict that is ongoing in the Rwenzori regions, particularly concerning those of Thinistis, these solutions are in that report. I've had the opportunity to talk about these things, and I've tried to participate in the processes, but you get frustrated at the end of the day that we, the so-called elite, civil society, we tend to speak, you know, big and never situate these situations, and situate the conflicts that we have. we have not tackled OBB in the manner in which OBB ought to what?
Okay.
Be tackled.
But
So
Suggest how we should.
I'm coming to that.
society of all the leadership.
I mean, I'm taking blame for it also. It's all of us. I mean, I would like to believe we're equal shareholders in what we call
So
the
remove
Republic
the
of Uganda.
grass from your mouth.
No, that's what I'm suggesting. I want to make sure OBB is tackled. So, and there are also other aspects that she talked a little bit about it, but didn't dwell so much on it. The proliferation of small arms, the conflicts within the region are also reflected in here. In 2001, the Honorable Mururi Mukasa, then Minister of State, you know, he served twice in that position. One as Minister of State, then I think it was elevated to a full minister for security. 2001 on the floor of Parliament stood and declared a neighboring state an enemy state, and even gave a statement, a ministerial statement, on the steps the so-called enemy state was taking to undermine the state of what? Of Uganda.
And 20 years later,
It has never been withdrawn, and we are still talking about the same things. So how do we tackle this OBB? How do we remove that grass from I don't know. Maybe I'm posing academic questions, but they have practical.
We really, there must come a time when, regardless of how successful we have been, there must come a time when we'll say, can we sit down, not to make a constitution, but to talk as a country. To talk as a country, talk freely is like what the South Africans did after independence. Truth and reconciliation. We need to do that.
but can that happen in this era? Because let me, if I may come in, the Interreligious Council, Elders Forum, together with the other leaders, including civil society, have struggled in the last 10 years to have a national dialogue. Last 2 years, we thought we were closer to a discussion table until the agenda and issues paper was discussed. It took about 6 years. Discussed, adopted, went to State House, and all we had was a photo moment. The chief executive office of this country refused to sign. And that marked the end of that dialogue process. So as we say that as a nation, we need dialogue. Can it happen in this time and era, or we need to wait for another government?
We can't wait.
I need to bring in Professor Ndebesa.
Okay, well, most things have been said. I don't know whether I have anything useful to add on. But if I can talk about the Munster Commission report. Actually, the exact title was Uganda Relationships Commission Report, chaired by Munster. In 1961, I think. 59? No, that was Wild. That was Wild. I think the Munster was 61.
Wild Commission was 59.
Yes, and it brings out all these disagreements, all these conflicts within the country. But when it came to discussing them, the grass went into the mouth again.
And
The people refused to
as we are cutting, the other
actually address them exactly, including the colonial state. They left those things unresolved, including the lost counties question, which was very pertinent, but even the British also just postponed it. They said 2 years after independence, you people will decide how to resolve it. They are the ones who created it. But they left it.
Part of self-governance. You resolve your
They just left it. But this self-government,
That was Pontius Pilate.
this self-government, the state now, the state has failed to be a neutral mediator in these conflicts. It is part of the problem. If we could have statesmen, they say statesmen look at
The future.
other generations, but politicians look at the next elections. So we have had politicians not not statesmen and women. That is the challenge, because ultimately the state is a mediator. They have the means of coercion, they have the resources, financial and otherwise information, but they take part in partisan politics. I wish there could be a leader in Uganda, the president, who is very clear that he wants to leave power.
Maybe we need
And he would stand his ground and solve some of these problems because he doesn't want to be elected. The challenge is that a president, be it Obote, be it Museveni, they don't want to rock the boat because they have vested interests in the next elections. We need somebody to step back and be a statesman, and be an umpire, and be a referee, and say, you people, let's have a dialogue. But in this dialogue, I am not going to have my vested interests. I'm going to have the vested interests of the nation. Uganda, of Uganda as a nation. We are still state building, by the way. Uganda is not yet a nation state. It is just a geographical expression, as Metternich referred to, Italy of the 19th century. Each one is for himself. We have got national anthems of tribes. You listen to what? A national anthem of a tribe. And you take time to listen to them and you hear.
You know,
They are all talking about.
we also have an anthem for Chigezi, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, but we have an anthem for Chigezi.
A national anthem.
And my new Chigezi is composed of very many nationalities.
It's a big joke. Oh my
Sorry, like Machiga speak, it's northern Bantu. Bafumbira are southern Bantu. Now, and the two are really, the anthology of the two languages is very different. But somehow, we have a...
Anyway, on a serious note, I think nobody should claim that he has got a monopoly of ideas or a monopoly of the direction. Even if you have a monopoly of violence today, tomorrow that violence could go away from you.
Yeah, like,
And then you will have a cycle of violence again. Both by the way, organized violence, political violence, conflict violence, and even a non-conflict violence. The one which is going on in Masaka is a non-conflict violence, I think, basically, or this ordinary crime. But the challenge is that those who are holding state power at some time in our history have refused to be statesmen and be a neutral mediator and bring us together and step back and say, now let's discuss issues of Uganda. We went to make the 1995 constitution, but definitely all the people who were there were eyeing the next elections. We need to have a dialogue when the elections are not so near and when the incumbent is not planning to stand. That is when we would have...
We need a hired manager. Which incumbent is going to...
No, an incumbent who agrees to have term limits. So we need to restore term limits so that we have a president who knows he's not going to stand and he will be a statesman. But as long as the president wants to stand forever, he cannot be a statesman, he will be a politician, and all one is doing is biased. Humabra is biased. They will say we want to have a dialogue. Even if we had that dialogue, actually, most people would be dialogued instead of dialoguing. Because once one has state power, state resources, and all that authority, and is not ready to be a statesman or stateswoman, he will dialogue the others instead of having a dialogue. So what you are going to have was going to be, some people are going to be dialogued.
Yes.
In that case, it becomes a monologue rather than a dialogue.
Edgar should be careful. Monologue we are done.
You know that movie?
I want to come in briefly on the dialogue before we go to the next question. You know, during at the height of election violence, last year, end of last year and this year, there were calls for dialogue. And the president did mention that he knows the address. He knows the address of all political actors. If he wants to talk to them, he knows where to find them. I think that answers that kind of mentality. Really tells you that you cannot have dialogue with President Museveni. Yes, he said he knows the address. This is isn't it? These people
But
are
what
talking
about
of
the
dialogue. I should sit and dialogue with this if I know the address. If I want to talk to them, I will look for them. Yes, that's what he said.
You know, conflict. I know we've tried to sweat the uncharacterization of the conflict as it has developed over the time, and unfortunately our concentration is so much on the contemporary conflicts. We've dwelt a little bit on the history of these conflicts. I mean, it's pretty much consensus amongst us that election violence has built over the time since the first election in 1961, 62. We've had, you remember President Museveni talking about Kategaya, what he did in the South Korea in 1962 elections. I think Kategaya was a youth wing or something like that, and the disagreements. Then 70s, I know from 70 onwards, I think the nature of the conflicts take on purely ethnic. Although you talked about Idi Amin.
Even at independence, it was ethnic as well.
Yeah, but other militias had not developed. Other ethnic groups had not acquired skills in violence. You know, there are many areas. After 1974, actually, the conflict in the Amini army was more intra-ethnic. The Kakwa, there was the Kakwa Christian and the Kakwa Muslims, led by Brigadier Rube. Remember late Justice Matthew Poo was a captain, I think. Was he a judge advocate in the court martial or something like that? It took then until 1978.
And not only inter-ethnic, it was also really Sudanese element versus the Ugandan.
Sudanic. You know, I've been trying to avoid mentioning some of these things because they can be very, people can be very, but there was that sentimental approach. And actually, the Sudanic factor has been very, very predominant in our conflicts in Uganda. 78, 79, they were here. You remember the Anyanya? They were brought here, I think, as mercenaries. Again, 85, we had a similar. And then we had all these militia groups moving, not really militia group, like UNLA. It went and transformed, I think it's to a rebel group. And it becomes a non-state actor and operating from within Sudan. And
so there's a suggestion that Sudan was the center for collaboration and.
But also there's also other neighboring countries that have been a factor. It's very dangerous to raise the names here, but you know whom I'm talking about.
If you could allow me, because many years of this conflict, my sub-region, the Acholi sub-region, was central. But I want to bring the example of what happened between us and the people of West Nile. Of course, the Amin regime did havoc to us. When the UNLA came, the boys who went there, the boys who went there, they should have been restrained. In fact, if we had a system that was right, they should not have even gone there. And they meted their anger. But at some stage, you know, the two communities, the elders from the two communities, got in touch, and a process then was developed, this Matoput which you hear, and that the West Nilers and the Acholis sat and accepted that we all made mistakes and that we cannot change the past and that we can actually live together.
And change the future.
Yes. And that reconciliation was so instrumental in removing the sense of raw hatred that existed between our communities, to the extent that it is now only coming back because of this conflict over resources and opportunities, not land even, because you get many of them there. But you know, if you go there, it's like you are taking the little from us, and then why do you come here? And it will come back. But if it was built on with a national process, we could be somewhere. I mean, there's no formula. If there were, we would just put it in computers and churn out the answers. They're not there. It is a question of sitting down and trying, genuinely trying, and hoping for the best, and learning from the mistakes, and building on the good things, and trying to overcome the mistakes. That is how we can build a sustainable country. If we don't do that, I mean, I keep referring, I watched the US, the anger that Trump has brought in America, it could break that country with all its resources.
But isn't it more of class?
No, it's not class. Now it is now white supremacy. It is incredible. I mean, you get people who even they will say,
You don't deserve to be here.
even the vaccines that Biden has, I'm not taking. You know, and that is how human beings can become so irrational. So it is incumbent upon people who have the means, particularly when you hold state power, to use it to calm people down, to expand their rationality, and to create opportunities for them to engage and define the future.
That's where dialogue becomes very key, because we lose nothing when we dialogue.
No.
And in a case, dialogue builds up to consensus. Builds up to consensus. I would like to throw something. I know Professor Ogenga may be very uncomfortable because he's from
No, I'm okay.
You know, was it at the funeral of Mzee Adimola or Tiberio Kenyi when President Museveni?
I was there.
I know you attended both. I know you attended both.
It was
Was it Adimola's funeral?
no, Tiberio.
Tiberio Kenyi.
Yes.
Tiberio Kenyi was deputy president of DP. Then in '84 he broke off to go and found the National Democratic Party.
Something like that.
Tiberio
Liberal
Kenyi.
Party or something.
Liberal NLP, which was also it was really an ethnical splinter group that.
It was anger.
But that's what translated into the 1985 coup d'etat against. But there's something I want to bring out. At that funeral, President Museveni, for the first time, said there were excesses on part of the NRA in the Chwali region, and he apologized.
And the impact of that just
Apology was incredible, I can tell you.
It was very disarming. If you had, and I wish we had built upon that momentum. Unfortunately, we lost out on that. I wish we had built upon that momentum. There are things I happen to know about that conflict that I'm not very comfortable talking on open television, but I'll say something. The persons who were deployed in Acholi to fight the so-called insurgents. Let's first begin the public rally President Museveni addressed at Peche Stadium in April 1986. The Basilio Olalo Kero, actually some people allege Olalo Kero was in attendance. He came disguised. And the language of the president was not one that was building dialogue. He was talking as a victor, speaking to the vanquished. And that obliterated any chance, any opportunity for dialogue. And that's when the UPDA /M was formed. And they launched attacks, I think, was it July or August of the same year?
Yes.
Now, we lost that opportunity when I'm giving you the background to the conflict, and some of the things that manifest themselves and become either ethnic agendas or as a ethnocentrism and what have you. Now, what I've picked is that the NRA is an amalgamation of all these fighting forces. So I'm told, I think was it the 35th Battalion that was deployed in the North, 35th or 34th, and it was composed mainly of FEDEMU and UFM combatants. And we all know the background of these things. That was the anger that was translated, just like you saw with Kikosi Malumo when they enter West Nile. And really, dialogue would help us unravel these things and have a genuine consensus for this country and chart a way forward. Talking of the regional aspect, the proliferation of small arms. The proliferation of small arms is very much related to breakdown of the state in neighboring Somalia. Northern Kenya has been a no-go area. Now we have breakdown of, we have the state in Ethiopia is not holding.
When you talk about the small arms, this is not new. By the time the colonialists came, actually they had more than 20,000 guns. The Ethiopians and the Arabs were bringing guns and exchanging for ivory and human beings, slaves. So people had guns, but they didn't kill each other. The guns will only come out
Protection of personal property and lives.
If society was threatened.
They come for protection of personal property and lives. Now, in this case, we are having light weapons being used for perpetration of criminality, political violence, and the prevention of others. Now, that's the other aspect I want to address. We are addressing it in equity and what have you. But a society that has been perpetually at conflict and that has not been transformed into a productive society shall always have these things that we are talking about. What is the level of industrialization in Uganda?
It's nothing.
I mean, it's mainly agriculture, and the fastest growing sectors are the service sector. We are consuming what we don't produce.
Yeah,
And you see, we have many companies that are withdrawing, exiting the Ugandan market, Game, ShopRite, and all the other big names they've been mentioning. Now, these companies come here, make profit, and repatriate it. It's not reinvested in what? In Uganda. So we have Ugandans being marginalized in the economic growth. We have growth without what? Development. They post very good figures, but at the end of the day, we don't have inclusion. And there's the moment people sense exclusion, we are going to remain perpetually at conflict. We may come dressed in suits, give very flowery speeches, unless we go back to those basics, we are lying to ourselves.
I need to give Professor a second, and also Sarah, then we go for a break. And
a brief response to that one. What you concluded with is what I agree with, that exclusion versus inclusion. Because poverty as a structural issue, yes, it can be there and people can always conflict, but they don't have to be violent. See, we should not mix conflict and violence. You can have conflict, always conflict will be there and it can be managed, but it reaches a time when it becomes violent. And I think there are very many factors, but the exclusion one is very, very important. Tanzania is not far different from Uganda in terms of development. In fact, it is even behind Kenya. And we have had kind of a nation there in Tanzania, more than we do have in some of these sister countries.
In all the East African.
Minus Zanzibar. In Zanzibar, we are having a potential terrorist hub in Tanzania. And the reason is very clear. Nyerere handled Tanzania very well. He was not so exclusive. He was not himself even amassing wealth. They actually built him a house after he had retired. He treated most Tanzanians equally. And he treated all communities in Tanzania equally. And this brought together a nation, among other factors. But the moment you start excluding others and getting excuses, you know, when those who are excluding, they will always find excuses. They will say we are the most trained. It is because it is historical. It is because we are intelligent. It is because we are many. It is because we are all these things.
And we get jobs on merit.
But we have to address the question of merit, as my neighbor here is talking about. If we can put meritocracy at the heart of recruitment and promotions, we shall have a strong civil service. We shall also have a nation brought together. As long as there is exclusion, which is always denied, you see, they deny. You say this region is backward. Now look at UBOS. UBOS came up with statistics to show which regions are behind others. But I don't hear that one being discussed in the parliament, even to give affirmative action to those regions that have been left behind. Affirmative action in more ways than one. We need UBOS also, that was a poverty map. We need them to come up with the education results map. And you see those who do not even have a grade 1. Look at the heresy map in this country. And you see those areas which are heresy and others are more heresy. Why don't we look at these maps, draw these maps, and then have a deliberate, conscious policy to narrow these gaps? When it comes to appointments, the political appointments even, somebody said that political appointments or politics is algebraic. It is not arithmetical. You see, 1 plus 1, 2A plus 4B is equal to a certain number like 32. You will not know the value of 2A unless you know the value of A, because 2A could be more than 4B. You get me? So you have to be algebraical. You just appoint somebody, you can put him in a high position of responsibility at the government when he has no authority and power.
So is he arithmetic or algebraic?
That is arithmetical. In other words, you are bringing this one from this tribe, this one from this tribe, but this one is more heavier than this one.
It's just a numerical figure.
So it's just a numerical figure.
Yeah, but the constitution, I know where Professor is driving to.
Politics must be, political appointments must be algebraic, not arithmetical.
So that the waiting is done.
I want to give you 30 seconds.
Say something brief in a rejoinder to what Edgar and Professor Mwambutsya have shared. One is on the power of a gun. I think now, even in our day-to-day lives, especially land grabbing, the joke around town is that if somebody is threatening to encroach on your land, you need to put a power bank, these big power banks that look like pistols, in your trouser and wear a tight coat to make sure it is visible. Then they will get off your hand because...
So this guy is going to kill me.
So now...
There's a joke a friend of mine used to tell, that whenever he wanted to evict squatters from his land, encroachers, he would bring a medicine man from Congo with monkey skins and they would slaughter white coke. That within days people would have vacated because of metaphysics.
Which could have and God to ensure land rights or grab land. Yes, many people grabbing land in this country. I think 80%. And you can go to the Makerere Commission.
Those whose land is grabbed are going to form militias or are going to form rebel
groups. Of
groups.
course, because they are deprived of a source of life.
And
land is life. How
And
we
it is
live
their
on
right,
land,
yeah.
we feed on land, we breathe on land. So when you come and take him on the street, what options do I have? So once we resolve these conflicts,
Do they say?
the second
Tawantu
dilemma is
Mako.
education. Our education system has created a class society. My child can marry Edgar's child. But if you have, so we have a class. If you are a security officer, sorry to use it as an example, you are a guard, most likely you will marry a maid. So we have created a class. If my children go to Kampala, parents go to Namagunga, they can talk to someone in Kisubi, Smack. But if your children are in where Chinyamaska, Geyogerere, whatever, then that is their class. So we have created this class through imbalance in education, intentionally.
But a quick one. What if that class overlaps with ethnicity?
Of course, they are the majority, and of course, there is ethnicity. Unfortunately, riding in the privileged vis-a-vis the less privileged.
So who are the privileged ethnic? Which is the privileged ethnicity?
You go to Ubosi and look at the poverty map.
No, I want to hear them from you. I want to.
Mine will be biased.
Let me mention something.
Mine will be biased. You go to Ubosi.
Something about education. When we were chatting here before the program, Edgar talked about when his dad was transferred, he was flown. When in our time when we went to school, you chose the school you wanted to go to, not because your father could afford.
But because of your marks.
Yes. Or you like the blazers, etc. And then when you're going to school, for the first time your dad would pay. But after that, until you finish school, there were train warrants, bus warrants, you don't pay a cent. And you even get uniform, everything in the school. Until, and I was reading yesterday, actually CJ posted me something, a video about 2014 AI and 2041. Yes, and the person is talking about the world that will be in 2041. It's about artificial intelligence. It's about competencies that can only come through functional education.
And equality.
Yes. Thank you very much. Let's have this debate have a break. I know it has been an exciting first half. We've really given the historical perspective of these groupings and how they formed, and that formed literally part of our first part. And now in the second part, we'll need to give, to understand these groups and whether they are strategic, part of the normative political landscape of Uganda. We'll need to understand whether Uganda actually really has enemies that have support, that give support to some of these groupings. But also importantly, what is the way forward for our citizens in the security, for their security in Uganda? That and many more will be forming part of our second half. Thank you.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Thank you very much, citizens, for being part of us, and welcome back from that short break. My name is Demiano Masesa, your host, and of course, we've been joined by my senior panel, and understanding these dynamics on rebel movements and all this required guests like we have today. Thank you, of course, Ndugu Tabaro, Edgar, for joining in. Thank you very much, Professor Ndebesa, for joining in. Sarah, thank you very much for being with us. And Professor Latigo, thank you very much for being with us again. Straight to Edgar, I want to start with you again.
You always wanted to start with me.
Yes. I started here the first, so the button was changed. So let me start with you. Do these rebel groups have a political agenda? What are the power dynamics pre and to date? Pre-independence and to date.
Let me start with the second. Power dynamics. You know, a lot of events and decisions that affect us as a citizenry in relation to security turns on information that is not available to the public. This is a profound statement I'm making. And from the facial expression, although I can't see it all, Professor Latigo, I think it's sinking in. A lot of events and decisions that relate to public security turn on information that is not available to the public. I think that's what informs the dynamics. Oh, yeah, plain left intelligence. And
Also picking from what the president said yesterday about those who gather intelligence from Uganda, says it's not on the microphone.
and that is him. That is him.
Yeah.
And looking at the contemporary security dynamics, President Museveni still acts like a desk intelligence officer. He consumes unrefined intelligence from different sources. We have all these gazetted national intelligence organizations, ISO, ESO. Then you have, Special Branch supposedly was merged with crime intelligence. But he also has other parallel units
The
that
informal, like
that
Professor
operate
said.
independently and parallel, and they are not known to another. So he's fed on raw, and there acts as an analyst at that stage. And I think that's what he was referring to, that his secrets are here. So those people are using Pegasus and what have you. And I don't want to go into controversial issues, for instance, where your colleague John Kazora talks about, in relation to a head of a spy chief, that the president said, I don't consume his intelligence. And that is the truth of the matter.
On one hand and on the other.
And the other, so which hand should I should I consider? So that's why I'm emphasizing, and I don't want to go into details, for obvious reasons. National security is not something I really joke with, and even issues of regional security. I happen to know one or two things that is happening internally and externally, and I don't want to alarm. I don't want to alarm citizens. I believe the authorities who get this information have the capacity to handle the threats as they arise. But unfortunately, the people at the receiving end are we the citizens. Like the dynamics we are seeing in this criminality of these guns and these panga welding, whatever. You know, the dynamics, the enormity of execution. These are not ordinary criminals. You can see tactical, strategy, and operational thoroughness in the manner in which they're executing them. You even send a note. You even send a note to the would-be victims. These are not ordinary people. My understanding, I'm not an intelligence expert. Neither am I an operative. But from the little I know, is that these are intended, they are purposed, they are purposeful and intentional on achieving a political result. Now, the political result doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, the way some guerrilla movements act. They can move behind enemy lines. Is it by moving behind enemy lines and inflict damage there to make a legitimate hold of the instruments of coercion, which is the state, the bad what? I'm trying to be careful, and I hope you'll understand my discomfort in going into the details. And what are the dynamics informing that? Are they external or are they wholly internal? Now, we as civil society, it's incumbent upon us to ask the right and uncomfortable questions. What are the spaces that we need to ask this? Why did it take a foreign journalist to come and ask the president of that? Why shouldn't we be the ones putting it to him? Well, not all hope is lost. We have a parliament. What has been occupying parliament in the recent times? Has any parliamentarian stood on the floor to ask the Minister of Security or the Prime Minister to give a statement and appraise? When was that?
They've done, and Deputy Speaker appointed a committee to go
They have
to
appointed a
Masaka,
committee to go to
and they have
Masaka.
been in Masaka.
My attention has been taken by the COVID committee that was going around. That's what.
They've done so.
And they've
Yes, they've done
they
so.
voted the
Leader
report.
of opposition, the Speaker and Deputy Speaker, even met with the Minister of Security and Internal Affairs
Yeah, okay.
in the office, then debated in Parliament, then asked for a statement, and when there was no improvement, appointed the committee.
There was no improvement.
Yeah.
So now, where are we, society? Exactly. You see, we are not holding our leaders to account. Believe me, these panga wielding people, any one of us can be a victim.
Oh, our leaders are so slippery.
The committee that went to over the massacre issue, I saw the minister
For
telling
security.
them not, yes, for security, telling them they're not supposed to be
Yes,
here and
even
doing
the
this.
OC who met with the committee, I seen the monitor.
There's been whatever
the
interdiction.
charges. Imagine. And we have seen the abuse, executive abusing the powers of parliament. It's not the first time. You remember the list of Human Rights Committee, safe houses, and the statements made by General Tumini. Very unconstitutional statements and conduct.
You see, I don't want to fall in that trap. I don't want to fall in that trap. Because if you, Anne, I'm not an expert on advocacy, you know advocacy skills. Public security is a matter that touches each one of us. I'm telling you, any one of us can be a victim. The Minister of Security himself, the daughter, was hit by a club welding or panga welding thug in Imbarara, and had to undergo an operation. Not in the recent spate. So, no, the present one. Then is it the present one, the general from Rukunjiri? Yeah. From yes, Jim's daughter. Yes.
When Jim reached what we saw on MTV, he clashed with the MPs, told them they have no power to do what they were doing. They said they had. Then he said, I'm government. Then they said if he's tired, he should resign. You know, it was not a good crash, really.
Created by the Speaker of Parliament, one of the leaders of the opposition. Then they are closed with authority to do that. And you see now, that's what we should be tackling as civil society. Eh? Any one of us can be a victim. Eh? If we don't oppose that because it's not wrong, but we just know any one of us can be a victim. And maybe we shall start listening when these things start hitting us close. Now to the politics bit of it, I don't know what angle you're talking. You know, I'm not an expert on political violence, and I think I'll ask Professor Ndebesa here to educate us more on political violence. The little readings I've done on political violence have shaken the daylights out of me. I read Franz Fanon. I read its review by a student at University of Dar es Salaam, and I abandoned further reading. Or else I'll get recruited in the same agenda. So I'll let Professor maybe educate us more on political violence. Pardon, is it? Yes, it's.
It's verification in Uganda.
No, it's verification in Mozambique.
Now it is in Uganda.
I don't know. You tell us because you're the.
I don't know what has become of us, that we don't accept certain realities and deal with them. You know, we are on WhatsApp group with Sarah and immediately after election, excuse me, you could see posts by those who are supposed to be propping government, posting and postering, and I spend a lot of time telling them it will not change the challenge that we face. Let us deal with them. Once you deal with them, it becomes clearer what you have to do. But if you just pretend like nothing is wrong, we are going to end up very badly. And then this country is not an exception. I mean, there have been countries which were stronger than Uganda
Ivory Coast.
that went into total chaos. So to imagine that we can't reach that level
Even Rwanda, under Habyarimana, was a strong state.
Yeah.
It was
So,
a very
so,
strong state.
so that approach, that approach
Romania.
is illusionary and delusional. We really have to be realistic about our country. That it has a potential to fracture into incredible pieces, and we must do everything because we have to live in it together to ensure that we don't go in that direction.
Dr. Ndebesa, I need to invite you in.
Yeah, you asked my neighbor here about the rebels having a political agenda, but we somehow digress from it. Maybe we could go back to it.
Yes.
Now, I wish we knew the political agenda, and those who are carrying out intelligence and the politicians who have made statements claiming they are privy to some information, they have not told us the political agenda of those involved in this spate of violence, so that we know whether it is criminal violence or political violence, because the two cannot be handled in the same manner. These military security strategies can resolve criminal violence, but they will not easily deal with underlying problems behind political violence. So can they tell us? Because if you have interrogated those people, they have arrested and they have told you so and so was sponsoring us, why don't they also tell us the political agenda behind that somebody, so that we discuss the political agenda? You see, political crimes where the political agenda is clear are easy to solve, because you can now negotiate out of security issues and see how to address that issue. Now, the criminal violence, you can use state power, also political, but also mainly state power. Now, we need to look at the politics behind some of these violence. It appears, if I can theorize, that somewhere, somehow, there may not be breakdown of power, but there may be breakdown of authority. The two are not necessarily the same. Power, you could look at it, if I can use some metaphors, you could look at it as hard power, as hardware power. You have hardware, you can suppress people, you can do this, or you can do this.
Or like matter in physics, that you can neither create or destroy.
But when we go to authority, then that is software. Soft power, software. So some of these communities, why we are even failing to get to the grips of who is doing what and why, is because there is a possibility that we are increasingly having a breakdown of authority. That is the software. Forget about appearing publicly that you are in control or something is in control, or we can come and suppress you and do this. But as long as underneath there is no soft power, software, the people are not convinced, you don't have authority, you don't have legitimacy, then those things can happen behind your backs. And therefore, we need to use both. The hardware, hard power, software, soft power. And therefore, some of these violence, whether they are rebel violence or militia violence, or actually these criminal violence, some of the criminal violence are also economic and political. That is why you find in countries where there is extreme inequality, like in South Africa, or Mexico, or Brazil, or even USA, or even our neighbor here in Nairobi, which is called Nairobi. The moment you have extreme inequality, you are likely to have challenges of insecurity, even low-key insecurity at a criminal level. It means there is also a problem at a political level. Why is there no violence in Scandinavian countries? It's because they have all got low levels of inequality and that inclusion. And that inclusion is not technical. It is political. You achieve it politically. Why do we have so high levels of inequality and they are increasing every day? So one of the antidotes to criminality is lowering inequality. Inequality in power, inequality in resources. And when we talk about resources, people immediately think about only money. No, resources are wider. All public goods, including scholarships, including promotions, including recruitment. That is also inequality. We need to resolve these problems. Otherwise, we are living in an age of anger. I think somebody has written a book along those lines. The age of anger. And this anger can always manifest in different ways. It can manifest in criminal violence. It can manifest in political violence. And therefore, when we to tackle these problems, we must go to the underlying causes and see how to address them and not wish them away. If you just wish them away and say, these are just criminals, we shall smash them, we shall crush them, you are using hard power. But I am telling you the underlying causes which never go. That's why in Masaka, this is like the third wave or the fourth wave. It has not just started. Have people asked themselves that this has been there anyway? It has not just started. Sejirinya has not been in Masaka and politics for a long time, but there have been a spate of killings in Masaka. That means there are underlying causes, and those underlying causes must be addressed. Because you may think they are even political, they could be ritual. You know, when people are desperate, when people are desperate with this COVID and lockdowns, somebody can tell them that when you go and kill people, you will be rich. And they can go and kill people. That's why I mentioned when I was on NBS, I think on Monday or something like that, I did say that let's not be prejudiced only to look at the political dimension. There can be a richer dimension. There can even be an international dimension, which must also, or regional, or international, or terrorist dimension, or cultural dimension, not only the political dimension. So we need to have maybe behavioral scientists to be incorporated into these systems to find out the underlying causes. Earlier on, we were talking about abusing even somebody's dignity, honor, to be injured. He can fight, he can kill.
Like lack of food.
Sometimes emotions can be behind a spate of killings. Let's not look at only the rational political ones. There can be irrational ones, but these irrational ones also arise out of certain situations. Why are we talking about the age of anger? It is the age of the neoliberal global politics and economics, where the gap between the rich and poor is increasing every other day. If the government of Uganda or the body politic or the political class in Uganda does not, now I am going to remove the grass in my teeth. If we do not address inequality in this country and wish it away and say we are rich because we are hardworking, we are rich because we are not peasants, we are rich because God blessed us, or we have no demons, or we are rich because we are intelligent, you are primitive. If we don't have a systematic way of addressing power inequality and economic inequality, today you will crush one group, another group will come up until you will crush no more, and you will also get crushed. So we have to address the problems of power inequality, access to resources, even access to power, or even access to people. During elections, you could see a candidate going to visit others, to visit people and talk to them, even at a radio station, another DC comes and switches it off. Now, what do you want that person to do? You frustrate the person. Somebody goes to address people in a stadium, not even in many people, you say you can't go there. You can't go there. That is power inequality. Now, if people become frustrated and anger blows up, it can manifest in various ways. Even in the criminal violence, somebody can pick a panga and vent violence onto other people. You know, when people are desperate, they sometimes do things which are irrational.
Psychological, mental breakdown.
It's a mental breakdown. So we have to address that mental breakdown by bringing hope to the people. And the only hope we can bring to the people is to ensure that we address the question of inequality, but also respect the dignity of people. We need to recognize people and respect them and not dismiss them. You know, like we are talking here, there are people who are saying, look, you hear those fools.
You know, the bit about all these
you hear those fools.
You know, the bit about
They
all
don't
these
even
things
listen.
all these things we are talking about.
Yes.
You know, they are enshrined in our constitution. Directive, whatever, state policy.
Objectives.
Oh, on by the way, it's not that we are talking about abstract things.
But do we follow
And we painstakingly. We
Constitution was there to legitimize.
no,
we
I
only
mean,
look at the
people,
constitution, Edgar, in this
before we
country,
promulgated
when
this
there is a
constitution,
problem and it is in your way.
before we promulgated this constitution, we had 7 years of consultations. We even had a minister of state, late Samunjuba, whose docket was constitutional affairs. And his
Uganda
mandate,
post is vacant. It shows you
his mandate,
maximum risk.
and you know, there
Because
was
even
wide
the post
consultation.
is vacant.
Then the process of debating the constitution, the draft. I think that was. I would like to leave the election.
No, the election to the
the
Constituent
election
Assembly.
to the Constituent Assembly.
Then people started saying we won. You know, you can't win in a constitutional making process.
And there was a movement system.
No, and
I need to bring in sir to make a
yeah,
rejoinder.
but professors left some issue hanging. The issue of political violence. I did not bring it out of not that I'm what. I really wanted you to
You have a
explicate on
grouse
it.
in the mouth.
Yeah? No, I'm not schooled in political violence. I told you the readings I attempted to make, and they scared the daylights out of me. For him, he has done more reading on political violence, and probably written. I don't know whether you participate in political violence too, but at least writing
No,
you have.
but how can we-
Participating in administering it or what? Or reading it?
Maybe on the receiving end, but also administering it. I don't know. But
Sir, let me invite you.
No,
I
you,
need to-
you
yes.
know when you
there's a belief. There's a belief. There's an emerging that political violence is legitimate. That
All
political
political violence is legitimate.
That's political
From
violence
your
is
point of
legitimate.
view, who
No,
is
no,
that?
no, no, no. I've said I've attempted to do readings, and I want to be to be educated more on political violence.
okay, then if I may,
It depends who is holding the violence now.
the two
He legitimizes his or her violence. But the other one, then you delegitimize the violence of the other one.
Let me
Okay, there are three
Professor, let me invite in
There
sir.
are
Yes.
3 issues. All dictatorships, in the end, fight themselves out of power. There is no two-way about it. They will dictate, they will suppress people, they will violate their rights, dehumanize whoever opposes them, but at the end of the day, they will take themselves out.
When will the day end?
I don't
China started dictatorship in 1949.
Okay, let me first
They are
have
still here.
Can I be protected?
Okay.
You know, the example, let's look at the example of yesterday. Guinea. The president's special protection forces took him out. And it will happen eventually. It is just a matter of time. It can happen in Uganda. No. Just it doesn't have to be SFC. But the army has always taken out presidents in this country. I'm not saying this one can. Okay,
The dynamics here are very different.
the culture of dictatorships in this country, coups are always engineered by the army. I don't know any other coup until, and even in Sudan, Bashir, until the army sided with the people. It was game up. After those demonstrations, the army switched sides. It has happened in all other countries. Ivory Coast, to name it, the army switches sides. They reach a time, even Mugabe, who took him out. So, no. You will have your say. Edgar, let me finish. So the third issue.
An external element.
Now you are
Yes.
going back to foreign enemies.
No, not enemies. Consensus being driven externally, and the army buckling up to the external influence.
When they have no internal problems.
The internal, but no, these were started by civil society. In Zimbabwe, it was civil society. In Khartoum, it was civil society, the doctors, civil.
Is the people.
Yes, exactly.
Let me
But the army comes in later. No, you see, I want to straight to the.
When finally the people take charge, the army switches.
Yeah, but you see, the international influence cannot
Let's
discount it.
let's conclude then. I will invite you in. Yes.
When you read the book on the 7 steps on how to rule a country, from dictatorship, from democracy to dictatorship, all those 7 steps are here in Uganda. To me, as a middle-aged person, it is unfortunate. I know as a country, we have reached that end before, lost the country, then sold to the current liberators, had recovered the country. So when you see through independence struggle, lost the country, then in 86 thought we had the chance to start with the 1995 constitution. Then we thought we started the constitution in Uganda. Is only read when it is a problem, some people's way, when it is in the way of people that have power,
It becomes a piece of
or
paper.
when they want to use it to abuse or capture something. But the constitution is not read and practiced in day-to-day lives of the people that hold the power. Away from that, do the groups that take up arms, do they have a political agenda? We don't know. Some groups, I think, Rakwena, Konye RRA, I don't know ADF's agenda, I've never heard of it. Their political demands, I've never heard of them. Itongwa had political demands about Itongwa. I don't know the other people's demands. Fighting in the Teso was clear.
But I think LRA started with the notion of single party rule, and they felt they needed to.
LRA was purely a splinter from the Uganda's USM of Lakwena, Alice Lakwena.
Yes.
It was a split. It was actually, no, it morphed.
When I came out of LRA,
LRA? No, it's the other way around.
it started with UPDA, which was
UPDM.
political.
Political.
Then Kony came in, then Lakwena came in. That's why it ended up with Holy Spirit movement. I mean, once it goes to spirit, you know the thing is different now. Yeah.
Well, there are social and anthropological issues there that tie into the political agenda.
NDF itself also claims that. Of course, also the same claim, like yes, they also say.
I don't know it. Yes, let me say this, that there is a time the president...
Look deeper.
No, Edgar, let me say what I know publicly. Of course, I'm not a security operative.
Neither am I,
No,
but look deeper.
let me say, there is a time President Museveni declared that ADF was defeated.
And that is true.
Yes, but towards the elections, then we see the reemergence of ADF.
Edgar, yesterday,
And
actually, there's yesterday.
There is a report on ADF killing
Yes,
people.
and he said that they are ready to go and attack if Congo allows them to.
Yes.
That's the president saying.
There was even a documentary last night on Al Jazeera on ADF.
I don't know how much I'm permitted to say and not to say.
You are free?
And the president said that the same in Mozambique.
No, that is a different group.
He said they have a connection.
That is Nani, which is this other group.
Muslim fundamentalists.
This one's from the Middle East. Houthi. Not Al-Shabaab, the other one.
Al-Qaeda.
The splinter from Al-Qaeda, the aftergrowth of Al-Qaeda. What are they called? ISIS.
ISIS,
That's
Islamic
ISIS.
State.
ISIS.
Okay, but tell us about ADF.
If whoever says that ADF is in existence, I disagree. And I have my reasons. It's another element. ADF, the original, they are not even more than 100 people, including their children and families. And they are deep in the forest digging.
It was
And
even declared that attempt on Katumba Amara was ADF.
ADF
Wasn't it?
ADF is a euphemism for another force.
That is not yet named clearly.
So meaning the other forces that are in the same bracket.
You were trying to dispute Sarah's position. I said and I reflected in 2014. I wrote an article, long article, political succession. Why can't we learn from trees? I can tell you that that article came at the time when Amama Mbabazi was going to be removed as Secretary General of NRM, and a meeting was called in Nambole, I went home and I couldn't sleep, and I wrote that article. But fundamentally, you know, the 20 years, 40 years in power is a very short span in the principles that govern.
Just above 40 years old. It's a long time.
No, it's
It
not.
is
It's a very short time.
is a very, very short time. And the biggest mistake we can make is to define and project a future outcome based on that very, is like an experiment without replication. Even if it gave you the correct result, you will not repeat that result. So in the end, we really still have to go back and say, what do we want as a country? We, not me. And until we can sit down and talk about what do we want as a country, I'm telling you, the guns are just instruments. The real elements are what people feel. You know, some years ago I was on TV, and one day I watched, I don't walk on the streets very much, but one day I watched, the president was passing, and you could see the difference between how, when he was passing, people would react when he came to power, and when people reacted at that time. And you ask yourself, and some people will turn away. But people don't want to tell the president that that is the case. That is where you have reached.
But doesn't he watch news?
All the same, maybe when you tell him, it has a bigger impact.
Why is Professor pointing at me when talking about the president? The body language.
Oh, well,
Professor, why? I need a professor. Can you answer that question? Why?
The body language is
no, you happen to be on my right hand side.
right hand side of the father.
He's lawyer. I don't know whether you are still his lawyer. So for that matter, you can reach him.
Sarah, yes.
Yes, on the question of power relations. I mean, who holds the power in this country? We have a lot of hidden power and invisible power. To the extent that, and I think it is really an open secret, that the vice president is just a shadow office with the zero power. Let me first finish. Let me first submit. I'm saying we have a lot of hidden and invisible power. The outgoing vice president, after seeing what had happened to his predecessor, decided to be completely absent, physically, mentally.
And we would be reminded every
dress
month.
code and whatever.
The social media took it
Yes,
up.
and the social media took it up themselves to remind people that Uganda has a vice president. Today we can have a few photo moments, but there is no difference. The difference will still be the same.
The president, vice president.
No.
Even energetic.
Energetic.
She's energetic. She's the prime minister as well. 51, 52. I mean, real energy.
Right Honorable Jessica
But
Rupa
you can be in that position arithmetically,
will
not
not be
algebraically.
will not be any different from Sekandi's legacy. When you move, I am saying that I wish I could say different.
And it's
picture.
going to stay on record. We shall revisit.
With a lot of confidence.
Yes, I wish I could say a different picture. I wish I could see a vice president who is in charge.
Jessica Lupo was very effective when she was in his.
Yes, when you go from that, we
That was a
have,
different ministry. I don't know. Maybe
when you
Sarah
go
is-
from that,
This
when
is
you go
closer
from
to.
that, we have the three arms of government: executive, legislature, and judiciary that are supposed to interchangeably monitor exercise of power and play oversight roles and exercise power, ensure that power is exercised in the interest of the people, as well as uphold the dignity of the people. I don't know any resolution of parliament that has been implemented by executive in the recent times I don't know it.
Oh, amendment of the 2005 Constitution was...
I'm saying
was-
resolution leave alone laws. There's a difference between laws passed and ascended to, and a lot of bills have been returned to Parliament in the recent years. I'm talking of resolutions. So resolutions of Parliament have been reduced to like decisions of a church. They are ignored outright. Yet this is a legislative arm with the oversight functions over the executive. The judiciary, when it rules on political cases, it has to monitor the political temperature of their country and then find a language to justify their decisions. The Edgar is looking at me. So,
No, you know what is coming to my mind? I'm remembering the Zuma decision in South Africa.
yes.
That's what is coming to mind when you mention these things.
Political temperature, they need to look at people's body language and then go and see what to write on political issues. So you have a trend where political arguments end in court, but also a court that must monitor the political language and the political temperature in the country in order to give a decision.
Just a quick agenda. Ideally, politicians should be able to talk to and one another,
Not
And-
talk at it.
not at each other. That's a very important distinction that we have to make. Talking to another.
Does that
talking at each
language of General Muhwezi put feature there when he told the members of parliament to go hang?
That is government.
Yeah,
Imagine-
but have we, as civil society,
Imagine
called him to order?
somebody- okay,
Have we called him to
but
order?
How do you
General
do it?
Muhwezi is known for impunity.
How do you
So
do
you
Honorable
it?
go
Muhwezi.
to a camera
But
and say,
when
I
you
am
speak
government.
when you speak to Jim Muhwezi on a one-to-one, he's a very rational human being.
You go
Professor,
to
you'll
the camera
agree
and
with me.
say, I am government.
He's a
And
very
you are
rational
talking-
human
no,
being.
No, but what rationality? You are talking to a legislative arm of government that you are government.
But what
What rationality is
the
in that?
problem is, how do you exercise
Your
the
power.
authority vested in you as minister?
How can you talk to a committee, a select committee of parliament like that? A minister that I am government. Is that rationality?
They're lucky. He could have been censored if Parliament had teeth anyway.
You want to subject him to what?
Well, I'm no longer in Parliament, so
Was it 25 years ago?
you can see now.
yes,
Even my
yes.
shirts are complaining that
That
I'm
is
pressing
how
them.
power-
You know, I'm completely relaxed.
A quick rejoinder. She's talked about the judiciary. You know, when politicians fail to agree and they subject their disputes to an adjudication process that is administered by the courts, then they should leave the courts to perform to their fullest of abilities. And I'm not a skeptic when it comes to judicial authority. And I have a background to that. I have evidence to present. Dr. Kawanga Paulo Semogerere, a pacifist in every sense of the word, started litigation as early as in 1979 with a case he filed against Kaira and 8 others. P.K. Semogerere against Kaira and 8 others. Was it Kaira and 8 others? Where he was disputing the overthrow of Lule. The question being, which was supreme? Is it the 1966 Constitution or the Moshi what? The Moshi spirit. Unfortunately, the decision was rendered nugatory because even the government that he was challenging of Binaisa had been overthrown in a coup by Mwanga and President Yoweri Museveni, now who was then the deputy chairperson of the military commission. But he did not give up. In 1984, Kawanga Semogerere, 1985, when we were preparing for the elections, the same Kawanga Semogerere was in court for sedition. 1985, you do remember?
Yeah.
You remember the incident where a little joke Bangmoy was
Yeah.
chief magistrate,
Yes,
where his
yes.
office was bombed?
Yes.
You remember?
Yeah, I do,
Bangmoy
I do.
later became
I do.
deputy minister was it
For
information?
agriculture.
Agriculture, something like
Mm.
that. Yeah.
Mm.
So, you know,
And
later on, in the 90s, the same Kawanga Semogerere now with
Zachary Olum.
Zachary Olum.
Mm.
Zachary Olum is an economist and served as deputy minister for housing
Mm.
under the first NRM administration.
Mm.
They went to court These freedoms that we're talking about, we take so much for granted. Like publication of false news, so-called seditious material. The multipartyism that we're enjoying now, pluralism, is as a result of those struggles.
Are we enjoying?
As the Supreme Court decision on that stopped monitor closure in this country.
What closure?
Hasn't monitor recently
No,
closed after that decision.
You know, you are talking to somebody who has been to court on a number of occasions.
Yes.
The last one being contesting the removal of the age limits, the ruling which took place in Bale. If you read part of the ruling, they will say that Parliament had powers to amend the Constitution. It was never an issue. Because, I mean, I would never go to court to contest that. But it was part of the ruling.
So who ground was that?
So you can see when now you see
The debate is interesting, and of course our time is fast spent. We need to get towards the
you see the fundamental thing is that it is not just that the politicians must leave the judiciary to do their things. The judiciary themselves should stand up.
How can they? You see, this is judiciary.
How do we get matters in this world?
Every judge, every justice of the Supreme Court.
How do we get matters in this world?
Let me ask.
That one any other way.
In the presidential petitions, election petitions, what has been the vote?
It always like
a difference of one.
How does that one come
No, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. I'm not mentioning names. Justice Mulenga. Justice Mulenga of good memory is deceased.
This guy from
He's not here to defend himself. We can't go into that. We can't go into that. But it's a narrow margin, right? One person, not so. Yes, 43. That's what I'm coming to. Exactly, age limit. Removing of the age limits was a 4-3, right?
On grounds that were not in the petition.
Are you ready to listen to me?
This is the debate.
No, are you ready to? I want to conclude the debate. I want to conclude the debate in this way. I want to conclude the debate in this way. I want to conclude the debate in this way. That when the politicians have disputes and they fail to agree themselves and they come to an arbiter, at that point it becomes the law of politics and the politics of the law. As we saw in the Zuma case in South Africa, you make a decision oblivious of the political implications. That's what you end up with.
In that case, the issue of hope still comes. And when we are, the very subject we are discussing is really, when there is no hope, I don't know, even if I went to court, it's just a waste of time. Then the only option you will end up is violence. Violence, yeah.
And that's why
we have all quarreled with our spouses in the house.
We're going to have a special...
If the arguments
Professor, we're going to have a special
can't resolve,
conversation.
There will be a fight.
And spill is over to the...
Oh yeah, there will be a fight.
Okay,
Sarah, I want to invite you.
conclude, especially on Masaka alone, because of the current cycle, the way conflict is in Masaka. That is the fourth wave of similar attacks. But also when sheikhs were being killed in this country, a list would be released, number 1 up to 10. Documents would be thrown, and all of them would be killed in that order, with the state lacking capacity even to prevent that. So the issue of documents, of whatever, is not new. But away from that, we have had unfortunate incidences where you see this kind of conflict having a base in security forces. There is a situation in 2017 where an IGP went on a press conference with like the perpetrators of conflict that had like a born-again perpetrators of killings in massacre. Before the media, they mentioned that they were working with police. We have people like, is it Sobi? You know, agents created by security agencies to perpetrate conflict and confusion and kill people in the public domain. So you can't know whether it is a non-state actor or a state actor. And that is very unfortunate.
As we conclude, I and everyone will have to take a minute of this one. What is the way forward for Uganda and Ugandans on this issue of insecurity and where you've just hit?
Well, me, I think I would give a simple way forward. Uganda, the definition of sovereignty is to the extent that sovereignty is the people and the territorial integrity of a country. You can have geographical boundaries, but without citizens, you cannot be called a nation. So Uganda belongs to the people of Uganda. Can we sit on the table? What is so wrong in this country that for 6 decades we cannot agree to a manner of political contestation and access to power? What is that crisis? Kind of 6 decades.
Are we the problem?
Are we the problem? Should we leave and all of us disappear and wait for a clean generation that can agree on simple matters like who accesses power and how power is accessed? During just last year, the memories are still fresh in people's mind. Kampala was like, a warfare. We had urban warfare in Kampala by state agencies. The violence that was meted on people that held divergent political views, the kidnaps, the rigging of elections. It is not
Physical
acceptable.
violence. Yeah.
It is not acceptable. We must agree, set rules, play by the rules, and ensure inclusion and equitable development in this country.
Thank you, Sarah. Professor Latigo?
I merely build by concurring on with Sarah on the issue, on the imperative that this is our country. We don't have any other country. And until we ourselves sit down and ask ourselves, what is the problem? How do we move and leave these problems and start a new life? And it is possible. It doesn't even cost money. I mean, you invite Latigo from Agago, I will fuel my car and come. I will sleep with my friends if I can't sleep at home. But give this country a chance to talk to itself and to say, we accept that things have happened, and we accept that things that have happened we cannot change. But we have a future to look to, and we have a country to build. And we can only do that together. That's the spirit that will create a difference.
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Ndebesa?
Thank you. I will conclude here to say that rebellions or militia, whatever, they will always come up, and violence will always come up unless you look at the underlying causes of those ones and address them in a statesmanly manner, where everybody is recognized and his views are also appreciated. They have talked about inequality. Yes, we have to have equality, and equality, equal access to power, equal access to resources, equal dignity, equal access to law, equal access to education, equal access to public resources generally. And we have to stop the politics of pretense. There is a lot of pretense to pretend that everything is okay.
Talking with the grass in the mouth.
Talking with the grass in the mouth, pretending that there is no inequality when there is inequality, pretending that this country can't have violence. People have said quite often that Uganda has always been there, to always be there, and time without end, maybe. I normally tell them that is wrong. What is Yugoslavia? What is Soviet Union? What is Sudan? Almost Congo is not there. We can have this country splinter if we do not recognize that all of us have a stake in this country. It seems there are those who think they have a stake in this country more than others, and they have the right to have a stake. The other day, the president did mention that he's going to give out jobs to the Druze, descendants of resistance army. Meaning if you are not a descendant, you have no stake in this country. And yet you are also a taxpayer.
If you rebelled against him, you want
If you are a taxpayer. No, forget about the rebellion. He says that the jobs will go to
your offspring.
one section.
I want Professor to conclude. Our time is fast spent.
they're actually staying at home. I refuse to ask for a job.
Thank you very much, Professor. Finally, Ndugu Edgar.
Yeah, thank you, Ndugu Masesa, Sarah, Professor Ndebesa, Professor Latigo. It's always enriching interacting with these luminaries here, on and off air. Incidentally, what is happening off air is even more informative than what is on air. I don't know why the off air is more informative than. I don't know whether we are cheating our viewers, but the grass in the mouth. But I'd like to borrow from the rich culture of Professor Latigo, the fable of Obibi. Obibi, yeah, Obibi. Violence in Uganda has become an Obibi to us, and we must tackle it. We must speak the language that addresses the ogre of Obibi. Whoever is promoting violence has to be called to order. One, we must.
It depends which violence.
I'm coming.
It could be liberation violence.
There's political violence.
But there is emancipation violence and privilege violence.
I'm going to address all that. I'm going to address all that. No, it's okay. And I'm going to address all that very quickly. Now, where there's political violence, the protagonists, as it were, have to dialogue rather than monologuing.
There will be dialogue.
They have to dialogue. We must find a way of bringing them to the table. And I'm glad the other day, was it in the interview, I saw an interview where President Museveni was saying he's willing to discuss with Bobby Wine. Not that I'm relating Bobby Wine to violence, but the most recent violence has either been around or including Bobby Wine. Two, when we're growing up, the urban population in Uganda was about 12%, 11.5, 12%. But now I think, what does the latest UBOS statistics say? I think we're edging towards 30 urban population. 30 something. About 30. That's a third of Uganda's population. Believe me, the dynamics of an increasingly urban population are very different from the dynamics we had when Uganda was a rural population. And I'm coming to that. Uganda is going to end up as a big slum because our patterns of settlement are not planned. And we are going to continue having juvenile delinquents. We're going to continue having juvenile delinquents. We're going to have an increase in criminality that is violence driven. Now, how must we address that? I was having a discussion with my contemporaries, my cohorts. That is what I was telling them. There's no magic wand to all these things, but there are a series of interventions that we can make. How do we address inequality? Yes, you can have economic growth driven by service industry, the game stores of this world, which are basically services, consumption. And President Museveni is very keen on consumption. He says because it's very easy to tax. And he says, yes, you just give you free the beer and you wait and you tax. Now, if we must promote, you're talking of equal distribution. I'd rather me talk of equitable. Equitable and equal distribution are not the same thing. Equitable is
access
Equity.
equal opportunities.
Exactly. Equity. Equal is, and I don't want to reopen. I don't want to reopen it, but I'm talking about equity. I'm talking, and equity has to do even more with fairness, and it addresses your algebra and arithmetics. Equity addresses the algebra, not the arithmetics, not the just numeracy. And
we want algebra.
Algebra, and the best way to address that is to fix 3 obstacles to economic development in this country. 1, power tariffs. 2, access to finance, the cost of borrowing. 3, transportation costs.
How will that bring about equal access to power?
I'm talking about production.
The
Equal access to
problem is
equal access to power is a
We
debate
are
that
going
can
back
continue.
to the beginning of the debate.
That was a discussion.
Because I'm not going to I'm not going to sit and watch.
we might go on and on and on, but then we also need to consider that our time is fast spent, and we need to thank our viewers out there that have been part of this very enriching and very highly tempered discussion. A lot of energies out here from very brilliant minds that have joined us today. Thank you, Edgar. Thank you very much, Professor Ndebesa, Sarah, and Professor Latigo. Thank you very much, my panelists, for joining us, and also thank you very much, our viewers out there, for following these discussions every Friday. Please join them. There we are live on YouTube. Subscribe always. We're also live on our Twitter spaces, ChatShowUgEp, Civic Space TV, and all Civic Space UG. These are all the hashtags that are trending, that always have these conversations going on. Please be part of these discussions, and also on our Facebook page live. Thank you very much for today. We meet next week.